Canadian.
You had your glasses off, I think, yeah, for continuity. It's
Oh, lovely to be with you here. So
so
lovely.
easy. Right. Okay. Where was I? Hello and welcome to the James Granstrom podcast, Super Soul Model Series, where I help people tune and tap into their natural state of well-being. This week's guest is an incredible human being, and her name is Ana Mattos. Ana is a highly experienced health and wellness practitioner with over 2 decades of expertise and experience in osteopathic medicine, naturopathy, breath work, mindfulness meditation, and health and wellness counseling. Originally from Brazil, Ana's story is very inspiring, and she's managed to create a very successful life and business for herself from humble beginnings. This week's Super Soul Model is Ana Mattos. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here. It's very exciting to be here with you and to participate of your show. So thank you.
Anna, absolute joy. So Anna, I randomly met Anna, and I don't believe in random coincidences anymore. But Anna actually treated and was a practitioner for my sister and her kids back in London. And my sister said, I think you really need to meet Anna. There is something very special about this lady that you need to meet. And I'm quite an open book, and any of the audience that's listening in, sometimes we get inspired to meet people, and we think, yeah, you're not quite sure what it's going to be. But when I first met Anna, I was like, this is a human being with a lot of light, a lot of energy, and I could just tell from even my own experience of like being in the wellness space. I was like, this person is living and breathing her work. And I was blessed to meet her in a beautiful hotel here in Marbella. And that is how our paths came across. And I said, Anna, you have got to come and share your story on the show because it is such an inspiring story. So here you are. And
Thank you.
I'd just like to say
I
thank
was just
you to my
thinking.
sister for introducing us because, Anna really walks her talk, and that's what the world needs. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's trying to share with us people who are wonderful role models who are walking their talk in integrity. And that's exactly what you do, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This morning when I was doing my practice, I just my sort of self-care practice of the morning, I was thinking of the day that we met and how we met and how there was like no expectations. And when you walked into the hotel and I saw you, I just needed to hug you, and you did the same. And it was just, was like meeting this wonderful person. It was so I just want to acknowledge you as a wonderful person as well. And, I think was a meeting of souls, like you also walk your talk. And I think we recognize that on each other. So thank you.
Oh, that's a pleasure. And I'd also, I have to thank my sister as well because she doesn't, hand out like, "Oh, go and see my friend" or whatever. She doesn't do that. And so when she did that, I was like, okay, well, she must be someone special, right? And, that's what I appreciate and I recognize in that in you immediately. But what I wanted to share and particularly share with the audience, Anna, is your beginnings of becoming a wellness practitioner and helping high net worth clients with regards to osteopathic medicine and what you're doing going around the world into these amazing spas and hotels and having your private practice. What led you to this? What led you to this life? Because there was a point in time when you didn't speak any English at all. So, tell us a little bit about your journey and if someone's listening, anything is possible because you are a living example of showing people that things are possible when there is no way and no how.
Wow, yes. So starting, so I'm a child, a working class child from Brazil. My parents were very troubled, alcoholic father, narcissistic mother, had all sorts of problems with siblings. I had a sibling that was autistic. So we were sort of very humble and troubled early beginnings. But me as a person on my journey, there's some extra layers to that, coming from Brazil, in sort of early 70s, 80s. Um, a lot of racism, actually, is still a lot of racism around in Brazil, in the world, and so on. But that aside, I experienced quite a lot of racism as a child. And also, um, a little bit of coming from a very patronizing family, like, you're a woman, you shouldn't, you couldn't, you don't. And then having to fight through all of those layers and coming out of that, I was very fortunate to fall in love with someone I met, and end up going to New Zealand, and that was like the step forward to what I needed. So as a child, I was very interested in spirituality. I was very connected to my great grandmother, who was the healer, was the village. São Paulo is not a village, but
Sao Paulo
she
is
was
one of the biggest cities in the world.
exactly,
Yeah.
but she was the local healer.
Right.
And I remember, as a very, very little child, going to visit her, and she had like queues of people waiting for her to say her words. People would go gather around her, and she would talk and give them herbs, and just literally give the healing. And I'll just be with her. I can actually feel, just as I talk to you, I can feel the energy now
So
coming
it's
in
kind
with
of
me.
like this beautiful like passing down of legacy of energy from your grandmother to you. Is that what
Yes.
you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I can,
Right.
as I talk and I evoke her name and I can actually feel the energetic sort of surroundings increasing. So I'm grateful to that. But going forward and not sort of making my story too long, I went to live in New Zealand. I started to learn about different things and sort of got connected to science. And within the sort of more westernized world, I personally myself created this idea where it had to be science-based, proven, and otherwise it wouldn't be accepted.
Right.
So for a long time, I was living within that.
So you're living in this kind of logical world where there is nothing else except for the facts. Is that what you're saying?
Very
But
much.
science is great. I mean, it allows us to really understand how things work.
Yes.
So, what led you into this wellness path? What was the story for you to find this understanding? Because when you're talking about, I can evoke the feeling of my grandma in my body. To listeners, that might feel really strange.
Yeah.
Um, but if you're not understanding energy and how it works, it might feel very alien to some people. But to you, uh, it seems very normal. So
Yeah.
how did that sort of all come about? Because I know that in osteopathic medicine, and when you're treating the body, you're treating the body for the pain and where some of the symptoms that are going on. But you've discovered that there's more going on than just the body. And so when you're talking about your grandma, you can feel it, right? You can feel her spirit or her energy pulsating through you. But if you're not that type of person, how do you tap into that?
Yes. Well, that's a great question. So for me, it was pretty much as you described, either here or here. The in between, it was almost like there was not an acceptance for it because there was the need to prove myself
Right.
within the scientific world, coming from that background where you wouldn't be able to do anything or be anything.
There's no credibility, so you want to be credible through science.
Exactly.
Right.
So I attached myself for a long time within that. And I wouldn't allow, or I couldn't see, I wasn't in touch with the other side of who I am, who is an energetic being, who is a spiritual being, and how that could blend together and work beautifully at a human level to improve my and other people's human experience of life. So I don't know if I'm answering your question properly, but how it came to me was through a series of traumas or realizations of traumas,
Yeah.
and and having to go deep, like a divorce, a sort of very dramatic breakup, um, breaking up from a country that I really loved and then going to another country. So this is the sort of fourth time I move around the world, but rediscovering that actually home is here with me, in me, and also that I can be all of that. I can have the science, the knowledge, the scientific proof, and I can also be spiritual, energetic, and I can blend all of that with my work. So that's how it came about for me to sort of restart my life. It was like reset, restart, which started in 2019, pretty much.
Okay, so tell us a little bit what happened in 2019, because you know, everybody who's listening is going to have to restart or reset again and again and again. And one thing I always like to remind myself of in my own journey, which can be quite humorous, but it doesn't feel like it when you're going through it. But when you fast forward a bit, you can look back and laugh. That's why I love Shakespeare's quote, which is "Life is but a comedy of errors." And it just makes
Yes.
you look at life with a little bit more life with a little bit more lightheartedness. And when I looked at my own trials and tribulations, I can look back and have a good old chuckle about them. But during the time when I was going through it, I was like, "Oh, this feels really heavy." But there is always in life a series of resets and restarts. And today, when you wake up, could be a new chance for a reset. And today is a new opportunity. But in 2019, take us back to something that you shared with me before that you can share with the audience about what happened to you for your next restart, because that was quite significant for you.
It was. So two things happened. I don't intend to be political or to get political or anything, but for me it was very significant. Brexit was one of the things, was the little fire there that kind of went like, oh, where am I and what am I? Why am I here? Am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing?
Because you were living in London, right?
Because I was living in London
Right.
and living in London for a very long period of time, like 20 plus years. And I still love London. London is one of my very favorite cities in the whole world, and I love it. Um, but it was everything about my life within England and London, and it was like, who am I? What am I leaving? What can I do to going forward? Because I used to say, in 10 years' time, I want to do this. In the future, I want to do this. And then it would never happen. And that was the first thing. And then I had a breakup, sort of very sad breakup with someone who I loved, and we intend to move to live in two different countries. We had a whole idea of what to do, what not to do. And then I realized, sort of kind of last minute, that it wasn't what I wanted. It's not the person that wasn't who I wanted, it was the relationship wasn't what I wanted, wasn't me. And then from that moment of having nothing, because I had already sold my house in London, got rid of everything, bought an apartment in Brazil. So it was like I had already reshuffled my life. And then I was at this point where all that I had planned went down the drain, and I had to think last minute of plan B.
I don't mean to laugh or giggle at the pain, right? But it's so funny how life does this, right? And if you're listening, I really want you to just be reminded of Anna's truth is sometimes you plan stuff and the universe goes, no, that's not what's going to happen. And, you know, I planned my life for myself to a certain extent. And the universe picked me up and put me somewhere else. And went, no, you're not doing that. And I was like, oh. And it was scary, right? It's scary when your plans are taken away and reshuffled by something bigger than yourself, meaning life.
Yes.
And it can be really humbling to have your life reshuffled without your permission, because that's what it felt like with me, right? I don't know if and that's why I laugh, because I felt like my life was reshuffled without my permission. But I had to just accept it, right? Because that's what's happening. So, you know, in my case, it was picking up, coming to Spain, looking after my family, looking after my parents, treating my dad before he ended up making his transition. It was a blessing in disguise, but I never planned on remaining or staying. But that's what's happened. And and very much like your story, your plans went right out the window. Life had other plans for you.
Exactly. And it just highlights to me the importance of acceptance, you know?
Mm.
Mindfulness, it's a big thing for me in my practice, in what I teach, in how I live my life, to sort of always step back into that sort of the practice of being present to what it is, the acceptance of what it is, letting go, recognizing and letting go of what is not. So just sort of tipping back into that, you know, and how life just went like, woo. And I had to think, I was working. So part of the work that I do is to work for sort of very high-end hotels and resorts. And I bring in workshops, and I work as an osteopath, as a naturopath. So I use all my skills within this sort of, you know, sort of beautiful, amazing place. And at the time I was in Oman. I was in Muscat in Oman, and I was doing a gig there for a month. And I thought, I need to find the plan B now. What is the plan B? So I made a list of things that I needed from the next place, the place I wanted to be, because I had this opportunity to rewrite my story.
Yes. So Brexit was happening. You were doing a month-long uh, workshop or placement in a luxurious resort, and you were thinking to yourself, Brexit's happening. I can't be in England much longer. So that was your opportunity to rewrite what you wanted. So what did you rewrite?
Yes. So I thought I'm going to go and live in Portugal. I speak the language. It's culture that perhaps is similar to mine.
Yeah.
I don't know much about it. I'm going to explore. So I made a plan. I had just one vision for me. By the 31st of January 2020, Brexit Day, that it took place, I was going to be living in Europe because I wanted to be in Europe. And that was like the most strong thing for me. I wanted to remain in Europe. So I made that plan. And as I was going through this list, a little pop-up screen came Madeira Island. And I was like, oh, Madeira, never heard of Madeira. Oh, actually, I had heard, but it was never like somewhere that I would think of going.
Right.
It's a Portuguese island.
That looks
And
like Hawaii if you don't know. Basically. Yeah.
it is like it
Yeah.
is Hawaii within Europe.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. So I made a plan. I came back from Oman in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, arrived. 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the same day, I came to Madeira.
So you got on a flight. So wait a minute. Did you fly to London to go and then take another flight to Madeira? Okay, wow.
Same day,
Right,
same day. Because I had 2 weeks to sort myself
right.
within my vision. And I came to Madeira, where I'm talking to you from today.
Yeah.
And in that weekend that I was here, I decided that I would move to Madeira. And I rented an apartment, and that was it. Not knowing that COVID would strike less than 2 months after that. And I would be in this island on my own, totally
With no
grieving
family, with no friends, nothing, because it's all new.
and grieving from a broken heart, from so many aspects of my life. And that was the best decision I've taken in my life so far.
Isn't that interesting? That there's two things here that I think that the audience may really appreciate. Number one, the intensity of your desire for change and transformation.
Yes,
Because if you stay where you are, you're not growing. And sometimes you need to shift where you are or change your environment so that you can grow into the new you. And life will sometimes challenge you and test you, but really it's just helping you become more stronger version of yourself, more resilient version of yourself, so you can grow into that version. And sometimes that growing, at least in my own experience, is sometimes very uncomfortable, because growing, like when you're a child, or you're growing into a bigger body, it's there's movement, there's more energy being required, and it's uncomfortable growing.
yes.
So what happened during COVID for you? Because you
So,
had all these challenges, right? You'd made the move, you got the apartment, and, and by the way, this particular, I'm hoping this resonates with the audience here, because it's just a bit of a understanding that what you think is a straightforward plan isn't always a straightforward plan. You know,
yes.
there will be twists and turns along the way, but life will still have your back despite all those twists and turns. And I always want to say, sometimes of those little pain spots that you get, it will still have your back. And Anna's story is basically a wonderful example and inspiration of that. So what happened next?
So as you're saying, and from an osteopathic point of view, sort of growing hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get the growing pains and the stretch and the move, and I love your sort of words saying that life does not go in a straight line, that it goes around,
Mm.
and we have to go with that flow always, or try anyways. So COVID came, and I was alone in Madeira, and for the first time in my life, I was completely alone. And I had the opportunity to be with myself and discover who I was as a person, and reconnect to who I am in my essence, and allow everything else that came as layers in my life to work through. But of course, with that came a lot of pain, because it came the realization of the past traumas that I had as a child. I've always been the resilient child in the family who would be like, no, I'm looking after, I'm managing, I'm strong, I'm doing, like, and I had always this posture of like, the
You
armor.
put the superheroine or the superhero t-shirt on, but deep down inside you're covering the vulnerable heart, right?
Yes. And I was not allowing myself to bring in the vulnerability, because that felt like weakness to me. But towards the end of 2020, I had COVID, and I almost died from COVID. I had one very dramatic night where I could not breathe, and I got the sort of the cytokine storm, the people who knows a bit more of science thing, that where your body is fighting against itself, and it's either or. You're going to live or you're going to die there.
Yeah.
And it was that time that you went to hospital, they would intubate you. You didn't know what would be your end. You may got out of that very well or not. But in my opinion, at that time, it was more about my life here and my life going forward and how I wanted to be. So I remember one night that I spent, it was the night that I say that I died, I passed away. The old me died on that night. And I spent the whole night, and my head was like burning in fire. I was in this little apartment in London, and it was December, and I was in this tiny little apartment that I rented, and I spent the whole night sitting with ice in my head and listening to Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. And I didn't go to sleep because I thought if I would sleep that night, I would never wake up.
Yeah.
So I kept awake. And from that night, when the day came through, it was it has been sort of a different path, a different feeling of life to me. And the fear, it's not that I'm not fearful, I am fearful. I'm still fearful, but I'm not fearful of telling people that I am fearful. My vulnerability is allowed back. My childish love for the world, it's allowed back. I don't mind being silly. I don't mind being looked at as ridiculous. It's like, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to go for life. And then it came all sorts of discomfort within that, a lot of discomfort, because, of course, everything comes to the surface.
It's almost as like when when we try and push those heavy feelings away, we're trying to protect. We have these protective layers so that it doesn't hurt ourselves or our energy. You know, we can close our heart or whatever. You're putting on all these protective layers to help you being vulnerable, but or to stop you being vulnerable, or to stop you feeling being hurt in the world externally. But what you said, I really, really like, and it mirrors a little bit of my story when I when I had my own near-death experience, which was, you know, you want to come back as like the child that isn't afraid to feel all these emotions because that's what we are, right? We're human beings, and I guess one of the gifts of life that makes us unusual and a miracle to be here is that this physical life allows us to feel all these different emotions. And I believe, like, I don't know for sure, but I feel like this has come up several times in meditation. It's like I believe that once you do part from this physical world and your spirit moves on and your soul continues, although not in this physical form, I really firmly believe, although I can't prove it, is that you kind of ask, did you enjoy that experience? And you'd be like, well, sometimes, sometimes. And sometimes it was really heavy. And but if you only lived in a place where it was all sunshine, lollipops, and roses and rainbows the whole time, you'd never get to experience the variety. And so sometimes those heavier moments just allow you to really focus on what's important so you can return back to that purest state of being. Now, it's not to say that we're always there, but it's nice
Yes.
to know it exists.
And you can always tap into it.
You can always
And I
tap
think
into it.
the biggest learning to know sort of the undulation of life, highs and lows, but also that nothing is frequent, nothing is certain. We can plan, we can desire, and we can manifest as well. I'm a big sort of believer and a big manifester. But we also have a path, and that life will take us through that. So how do we experience that path? How do we experience from A to whatever B is, and not the arrival at B? It's like, how do we go about? And that for me has changed. And that's one of the things that in my work today, actually not just my work, in my everyday life, in my interaction with people, with friends, with family, I try to bring that to the surface. How do you experience whatever it is? It's hard, it's painful. How I experience that. Do I lean into it? Do I feel it? Do I let it work? It's whatever needs to work through so I can learn, grow, and move.
Yeah. I'm kind of lost for words for a little bit because that's like a beautiful little meditation right there. And I think Anna's words really sort of allow us to become present to realizing that life is a dance, it is a movement, and we are all part of this cosmic dance. And sometimes it makes sense, and sometimes it makes no sense.
Yes.
Sometimes a breakup makes no sense. Sometimes being put in a new country makes no sense. Sometimes a political divide makes no sense and it forces you to move. Sometimes moving to a new country makes no sense because you have no idea where you're going to go. And at the beginning, it's very uncomfortable. But eventually, all of these things will make sense. And it will only be when you cast your eyes back and you're living in a future now that you can go, oh, that will make
Mm.
sense now. But it doesn't whilst it's unfolding because you cannot see the bigger picture. And I think sometimes what I love talking to you about and what you've spoken about today is it's this new perspective. Having the bigger perspective allows you to not necessarily understand every step of the way, but to understand that there is a bigger picture that maybe you cannot see just yet. But if you can have some daily habits, if you can have some practices, if you can contribute to the world in an uplifting way, then maybe you get to ride on this thermal where you get to see the bigger picture more often than not. And I always try to live there, but every so often I dip. And just like everybody else. But that's why I always start the show by saying helping you tune and tap into your natural state of well-being. That's the thermal I'm talking about. That's that
Yes.
natural high I'm referring to. And you said it so eloquently with your words a moment or two ago. And
We're here for a purpose. And now, like for example, I am in the second half of my life. And this is the time where, so the first half, I learned, I grew, I heard, I moved, I kind of, like everything was, and now it really is like, I don't, it's like the phoenix, it's kind of, okay, so you can now just show and help,
help.
be it,
And,
that's
and,
it.
and I've got to ask you this, because this is really interesting for me, like as a curious human being. What is the help, the helping? What's that given you?
Love that. It's such a good question. It gives me so much joy. It gives me joy.
Gives
It
you
makes my eyes twinkle. It gives me the warm feeling in my body. It gives me purpose. It gives me love.
Mm.
Yeah. Back. I feel loved.
When you're helping people, you feel loved.
I feel loved.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting. But yes, I feel loved.
Yeah.
And it's nice to feel loved.
I feel when I'm helping. like when I'm doing these podcasts, even though I don't know who it's helping, lots of people write in. I mean, it's more often than not nowadays, but which is lovely, and people I don't know,
Nice.
but I feel protected.
Protected.
I
How
feel
wonderful.
protected because I have this little thing that I wrote out, and it says, "When you take care of God's business, God will take care of yours."
Yes.
And I was like, that never a truer word said. And I've actually lived that by looking after my mum and looking after my dad. And my
Yes.
whole experience prior to that was get,
How interesting, yeah? How interesting.
give, right?
Give, give, give.
Don't
Yeah.
give.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to write that down because that was really.
That's a good one. That's a very good one, because
That's huge for me because, like with modeling, I've had some fantastic successes. I've had some fantastic projects and working with amazing people. But ultimately, at some level of my egoic being, it was if I get that, then I can go there and I can do that. It's only if I can accumulate, then I can do it. And it was just such a, dog chasing its tail. When's the
yeah,
agent going to call? When's it going to do this? But it was only when I actually went straight into my dad needs my help. I'm going. Drop everything. Drop all your projects. Drop all your work, even if it's paid. Drop it all. Go and help your father. Go and help your mother. Drop it. Took a weekend bag. You know the story. That weekend bag was 5 months. I was like,
yeah,
okay, COVID. I was like, give. And then the day that my dad died, I was like, Mum, I'm staying. I'm not going back until you are where you need to be. What do you want? And that was 3 years. Give. And in that time, I felt protected, cared for, abundantly provided for, had all my needs met abundantly, and I still couldn't figure out like what's actually happening. And it was because of the give.
it's so inspiring, and it's like, it's I this all these things, can sound so cliche because we hear da, but authentically, like the way you're saying, because you experienced it, you felt it, it needs to be said, it needs to be heard.
But I just want to say, I love talking to you, Anne. I could talk to you for hours. It's just so easy to talk to you. And I just want to say, Anna, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your open heart, just sharing your troubles and daring to be vulnerable because it's not easy to be vulnerable and expose yourself. But it's the only place where freedom really exists.
Yes. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here, to be present, to tell my story. And also, thank you for your sister to introduce both of us. I just want to say a thank you again for her. And it's been such a pleasure to be here. And I hope my story can inspire people and and just be present, just be there, just be present and live it. Live it.